Brian gave Melody a look, then turned to the rest of us, shaking his head. I was talking about the animals in the safari park. Equus quagga is also known as the zebra, Rhinocerotarde is the rhino, and Panthera leo is the lion. Oh, shouted Dexter. Why didn't you just say that in the first place? I can do all of them. He dropped onto all fours and gave us his best impressions of a zebra, rhino, and lion, as well as a giraffe and a warthog. Apparently, they all just seemed to involve crawling and grunting, but he did look funny doing it. Brian wasn't impressed. Your warthog is exactly the same as your giraffe, he said, which is exactly the same as your zebra, lion, and rhino. No, it isn't, objected Dexter, demonstrating again for Brian's benefit. Afraid it is, Dex, said Shed. Hey, Addy, tell Dexter the difference between a warthog and a giraffe. Why would Shed think I knew? I looked at him and made a face that I hope said, Eh? What on earth are you talking about, mate? Shed got it and replied, Well, you must be an expert, because you'll have seen them all in Africa when you lived there, Addy. Yeah, said Brian, he's got a point. You probably know loads of cool stuff that I could add to my research. I looked at my friends. They were the best mates anyone could ever have. But sometimes they could be really dense. I mean, really dense. Even Brian. So much so that I was going to tell them that I was hardly an expert and I knew as much about animals as they all did about flower arranging. When I stopped, I grinned to myself. This was the perfect opportunity for a wind-up. I am an expert, in fact, I said, holding my head up high and trying to look as expertly expert as I could. My village in Nigeria was always full of animals. There were two-headed emus and giant spotted flying camels all over the place. They were practically my pets. By the time I'd finished describing these mystical beasts, I was in full David Attenborough mode. Dexter's eyes were as big as snooker balls, and his mouth had opened so wide in amazement at the thought of these incredible animals that I'm sure I caught a glimpse of the gooey wagon wheel he'd scoffed for lunch. I desperately tried to keep a straight face as I carried on. Oh, and my personal favourite are the bum bees. They're half bee and half bottom. They feed exclusively on baked beans. You always know when they're near because of the terrible stench and the sound. Bum bees, Dexter said quizzically. What sound do they make? I leant over in his direction and pursed my lips together and... I blew a large raspberry in his ear. They're basically like a swarm of giant flying farts, I said, when I was all raspberried out. Just a whiff of their odour is enough to kill a fully grown human. Brian and Melody obviously weren't fooled, and Shed shook his head with amusement. But Dexter bought it hook, line and sinker. Two-headed emus, giant spotted flying camels and bum bees. I can't wait to see them, he shouted. Brian and Shed fell about laughing. Even Melody was giggling. What? What is it? Dex, I said, if you ever see a bum bee or a giant flying camel, I'm taking you straight to the doctor. Dexter looked cross when he realised I'd been teasing him. Yeah, well, what if I see a night spider, he said defiantly. That really wasn't what I'd expected him to say. Dexter was pointing to a wall with the coolest graffiti I'd ever seen. We all looked up at it. There was a splash of colourful zigzags interspersed with googly eyes and sparkly diamonds. At the bottom, the artist had signed it, Night Spider. The N and the S were much bigger and brighter than the other letters, so they really stood out. Wow, cool, said Melody. Amazing, I agreed. I wonder who this night spider is. My question was greeted by silence. The gang just stared at the wall, blown away by the night spider's work. But there was something about the graffiti that made me feel weird and uneasy. I looked at the others. They were all acting normally, pointing out their favourite bits to each other. But something strange was happening to me.